Exploring the human journey.
For the last 30 years, I've been helping people master the inner dimension of yoga with Yoga Nidra. Yoga Nidra is really meditation made easy. We all know we should be practicing meditation, yet a lot of times we are focusing on our knees, our back. We spend more time looking at the clock than watching our thoughts. Well, Yoga Nidra is different because it uses the biology of the body, and it's something that the body already knows how to do. Every night when we fall asleep, we move down progressively through brainwave states where our thoughts move further and further away from us. And it's in that gap between us and our thoughts that we drop into sleep. Well, in Yoga Nidra, we follow the same biology of the body down towards sleep, but we rest in that gap between us and our thoughts, where meditation happens naturally. It's not an effort or a struggle. To meditate, meditation happens. This is why for many people, Yoga Nidra is a wonderful access to getting the benefits of meditation without having any experience, knowledge of meditation. You don't have to sit for a long period of time to be able to get those relaxation benefits, the connection with your wholeness, de-stressing. These are all available to everyone from the very first time they practice.
Hi and welcome. I'm so glad you joined us. Our special guest today is Dr. Kamini Desai, and she is amazing. I can't wait for you to hear all about Yoga Nidra, all about the things that you're doing. Kamini, thanks for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me.
This is going to be fun. Now, in 2018, Gail and I took yoga teacher training. And when we did that, we learned about Yoga Nidra. And my experience was I didn't know anything about yoga at the time. It was a brand new experience. Casey Miller at SWIHA, Southwest Institute of Healing Arts, gave us the idea that she said, you would probably like to sign up for yoga teacher training. And when we did, we became acquainted with your work, and we had experienced Yoga Nidra for the first time. And I was like, whoa, this is fascinating. Allowing your body to feel like it's in a state of sleep, but then to realize it's like this elevated relaxation.
And it was interesting because it was so hard for him to grasp the concept. You mean I'm just going to go there and lay there?
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah.
I was like, don't you do
like,
stuff?
It's not that big of a deal.
Yeah.
You'll really get a lot out of it. Just trust me. Just do it.
Yeah, because I'm the doer and the planner, and I've got, my mental checklist and all of the things. And I love how you give presence to this. This is like a kind of a simpler way to meditate. If you're having a hard time being there and you have to do, you talk about just being, and it gave me that space where I could just be.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, in the word Yoga Nidra, yoga, entering a state of wholeness or completeness, Nidra, sleep. And, the beauty is Yoga Nidra is a type of meditation, but as you said, most of us are efforting. We're like, okay, I have to now do meditation. We're like, one more thing that we have to check off our list.
Yeah.
And the beauty of Yoga Nidra is the way that the sequences are set up, the way that the techniques are set up, is that it automatically takes you into meditation rather than you having to do it.
Yeah. You talk about how you take us through the various stages of sleep and basically the stages of awareness of being awake, and then you go into the dream state, then you go into the deep state. And then when you get into that fourth state, you're kind of in the state of beingness. Now, this fascinates me because when I started yoga teacher training, the Om symbol was something brand new to me. And I learned about the Turiya.
Yes.
The little dot at the top. And it said, this is the fourth state of consciousness, but I didn't know what that meant.
Yeah.
Until I read your book and you actually gave me some languaging. So if you guys want to know more about Yoga Nidra, you've got to get Dr. Kamini Desai's book.
But it's more than just Yoga Nidra.
Oh my gosh.
There's so much more packed into it than just that. It's like so much stuff that will just make life make sense.
Yeah.
Right?
It's like you gave...
That's how I felt.
You gave languaging and you gave presence to a lot of the yoga philosophy. The things that I was like, oh, I'm not exactly sure how that works. You actually talk about it and you describe it. So, and this whole thing about the fourth state of consciousness, give presence to that space.
Yeah. So one of the things that the yogis say in ancient scriptures is that as human beings, we are always either awake We're always dreaming or we're in deep sleep. Awake, dreaming, deep sleep.
Yeah.
But there is a fourth state that is actually prior to any one of those, and that is called the fourth.
Mm-hmm.
And very often, and we always say it's the fourth state, but in the scriptures they just call it the fourth.
Oh.
Because it's not even a state, it's that which is prior to all other states, right? And so the beauty of this is there's a beautiful scripture called the Mandukya Upanishad that talks about the three states of consciousness and the fourth. And what it says is that you can actually, by entering into a state of deep sleep consciously, it is the secret doorway, I love that, to the fourth.
Oh.
And it says that this is the purpose of our humanity, is while we are embodied, as we are living in these three states, to experience that fourth state, that state of beingness, so that we can recognize it and be grounded in it while we are awake, while we are dreaming, and even while we are in deep sleep. And this is what is called Turiya that you were referring to.
Oh, so good. And even in the Om sound and the AUM, the A is the awakened state, the U is that the kind of the dream state, and then the M is the deep, and then after you go then there's the silence.
Yeah.
And that's the fourth state of consciousness.
You got it. Yeah.
It's like you put it all together. So I learned that through your writing in this book. I went, you put it for me, you put it all together, and now you gave it language where I had the pieces and I was like, I remembered this, and I had studied in a book something, but the way you give it presence is amazing. Thank you for writing this book.
I'm so glad. Well, I'm really happy because I love Yoga Nidra, and as you were saying also, it's, Yoga Nidra for what tool, what problem is it designed to solve? And it's really about our liberation and recognizing our beingness, but it's also about life mastery. How do I deal with my patterns? How do I deal with, issues with relationships or work or, all these different stresses that we have, our health. This is for everything. And, I know I sound like a Yoga Nidra cheerleader, and that's because I am.
You should be.
So tell us why you ended up going down that pathway. What was it that just brought you to that space where you're like, no, this is what's going to really change a lot of people?
Yeah. Well, just a little backstory. So I grew up as actually the daughter of a yoga master, Yogi Amrit Desai. And so I had a lot of these teachings as a youth, which I'm very grateful for.
Yeah.
But as I think we all know, it's not enough to just know something at the level of the mind. We have to go and experience those truths for ourselves until they become actual wisdom. And so for me, I grew up in the community, and it was easy for me to be balanced when you're around a bunch of balanced people. And then I decided I wanted to be a diplomat, and went away, left the community, and went off to Switzerland to study international relations. And I was like, I'm going to bring peace to the world.
Yeah.
But what I found out is that it's highly political, highly stressful, and there's not a lot of peace in the peace process. And it was then that I really turned back to all the teachings that I had received and started doing yoga and also Yoga Nidra. And my apartment mate said to me, do you realize that you're getting up and doing yoga and meditate and doing this Yoga Nidra stuff every morning? And I said, yeah. And she said, do you realize it's making a difference? And I said, yeah, I think so. And so she asked me to help her. And all the people in my apartment building started asking me to help them.
Oh, wow.
Nice.
And the beauty was anybody can do it, right? You don't even need, you can do it in your bed. You don't need a yoga mat. You don't have to be able to touch your toes. Everybody gets to have the benefits of yoga. Everybody's in and nobody's out. And it was really that, that ability to bring an experience of peace to everybody that sold me. This is a way to bring the benefits of yoga to everyone. And so in the end, I'm still teaching about peace, but inner peace.
Yeah.
Yeah, right?
Were you doing kind of talking yourself through it? What was kind of the way you were doing that?
Yeah, so I had learned
space?
Yoga Nidra as a child, and there are a series of techniques, and each of the techniques are beneficial. Generally, when you receive Yoga Nidra, you receive it. So it's either guided to you or you're listening, because the whole idea is not to do anything, not even think. However, once you've done it quite a few times, it's almost like you open a channel to that beingness. So you don't need necessarily the techniques after a while. You can just basically close your eyes and in one breath, boom, you're there. So at that time, that was more what I was doing. However, now when I practice, I do a combination because the techniques themselves are really good for you. Yeah.
So I know that a lot of therapists use cognitive therapy about learn your pattern and then try to unlearn it and da da da.
Yeah.
But you talk about how Yoga Nidra can help you with those patterns and unlearning them. Give presence to that.
Absolutely. Yeah. You really have read that book. I'm very impressed.
Love this book.
So I'm a fan of all modalities. So I'm never against anything. I think everything can work in complementarity with each other. So I think of cognitive therapy as kind of a willful way to create a different relationship with your thoughts. So a thought comes up and you say, okay, I'm not going to consciously redirect or consciously refocus. And that's great. What Yoga Nidra does is it helps you do the same thing, but with the biology of your body. It helps you do it from the inside out. So rather than doing it willfully from the outside in,
I'm going to do.
Exactly. You're putting your body in the place where that disengagement from those thoughts that aren't serving you naturally happens. I'm all about, so it's this, we're in this culture of doing. No change is going to happen unless I have to work for it. Yeah. And Yoga Nidra is actually counterintuitive for most people in the West.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Because exactly as you said, you mean I have to lie down and do nothing and it's going to work? How is that possible?
Yeah.
Well, it's even, you give presence to how even in the West, we have to do sleep. Okay, it's time to sleep. Oh, I got to do so many hours. I got to do this and I'm going to clear my mind. I'm going to do this.
Exactly.
I have such a hard time just being.
Exactly. That's exactly it. We're so convinced. And I kind of compare this to gear shifting. So we are all really good at first gear, which is doing, right? And doing is limited to the waking state. But what yogis would say is that we actually have other gears where change can happen through non-doing, where the less you do, the more the change happens. And this is what happens when we consciously enter into the dream and deep sleep states. We're not just relying on gear 1, doing while being awake to make the change. We can go into gear 2 and 3, where the less we do, the more it happens.
It makes sense. I mean, I remember being in school and trying to get through my chemistry classes, and the place where I would solve the hardest problems was in my sleep.
Exactly.
I would know the answer right away.
Yeah.
And so that totally makes sense. I get it.
There is actually an inventor, and I can't remember if it was Edison or one of those, who actually had a cot in his laboratory because he said the answers come in the space between my thoughts, not in the thoughts themselves. It's exactly what you're saying.
Yeah.
A lot of those guys were inventors, but they were tapped into that universal consciousness and it was coming. Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, Einstein, Newton, he's out in nature, not before, he wasn't thinking his way to those answers. They dropped in. Yeah. And it's interesting because in Yoga Nidra, there's, you go through these brainwave states, and the theta brainwave state is associated with exactly what you said, the answer to problems, solutions, emotional integration. We often think, oh, well, I have to figure out the cause of the problem and then I'll be emotionally integrated. But according to Yoga Nidra, going into these states, your brain, your body knows how to resolve it.
Yeah. It is. It's so true. I get downloads and downloads in that state.
Yeah.
And come out and I'm like, I thought for days.
Yeah.
And couldn't figure out how to do it. But in the flash of getting in between those thoughts, it all falls into place.
Yeah.
And I usually run down and I'm like, I know, I got it, Dave. Yeah. This is what we're going to do.
Gail has developed quite a meditation practice. She's created a space in the home where it's just her space. And she's put things in there, just allow her just to be centered. And I find it fascinating because in meditation, I'm always trying to problem solve and find the answers to everything. And, I'm trying to, and even the ego tries to protect itself and, all the things. And I'm like, oh, I've got to get rid of that. Talk about how you're able to drop into that space and just into that being.
I've been able to be in those Nidra states and now I can drop in just like you said but it came through practice. It wasn't overnight by any means, but I can do that now and be in that space without having to go through it. And oftentimes, I start centering like you centered us to begin with, and I'm like, oh, I'm starting to drop a little. Oh, okay, no, we still got to stay in reality right now.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just so useful, really, to life.
Absolutely. And it is that skill of like, you're now able to gear shift.
Yeah.
Think of it that way, right? You're not just stuck in the one gear.
Yeah. Huge difference.
That's good. So you allow yourself in Nidra to get into that sleep state, then you're able to get your brain to kind of not have to do the do, and so you can be in the be.
Exactly. That's exactly it. So the metaphor that I sometimes use is the metaphor of floating, right? So when we're doing, like to try to swim, floating's not going to happen, right? But the people will say to me, how do you do Yoga Nidra? You can't do it. It's through a subtraction of doing. And all the techniques are designed actually to help you do less and less and less until all of a sudden, before you know it, you're floating. Right? It's the same exact concept as floating. It's the less you do, the more you enter that state of beingness.
That is awesome. Now, I'm very interested in your heritage, the way you grew up. Did you grow up in what country, what culture? Where did you what was your origin?
My father came to the States back in the 60s. So he was one of the original pioneers to help, start this popularity of yoga in the West.
And you know what? I know that. You know how I know that? Because he was my project for my YTT class.
We did teacher training. It was Gail's project.
So I find it very fascinating that you're here now.
Look at that, small world.
We studied you in a book.
And what's funny, I didn't realize how much Sweeha was hooked in with you guys. And I just kept saying to the other people, I'm like, this is exactly what we do. It's no different than what we do. So anyways, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I just find it funny.
He's a pioneer. He's creating something new.
Yeah. And so he came to the States with that back in the 60s, and I was born here in the States. But he brought those authentic teachings with him. And so I grew up in an ashram, spiritual community is what an ashram is. First in Pennsylvania and then up in Massachusetts. So I got the benefit of not just my dad or my mom, but a whole community of people around. So
what's that like as a child when they're like, shh, they're meditating? Tell me about how that was.
I don't remember those pieces. I'm sure that they told me, they shushed me, but after a while, I think you just get into the frequency of it and you sense it. I think in a certain way, kids, maybe even more than adults, like I'm thinking of pets. And when they enter a room and there's Yoga Nidra happening, they just roll over. They just go into Nidra. And I feel like kids are similar. They sense the frequency of the energy around them. And they can react to it in different ways, but they definitely feel it. So I think, for me, every night that there would be a satsang, or satsang means to be in the company of truth, a talk. And I would fall asleep to it every night. So it was it was like such a regular part of life. I didn't really question it. Like, oh, no other kids have satsang or something like that.
Well, I mean, today kids fall asleep to TV instead, right? So you were pretty fortunate to have that to fall asleep to. Much better space to be in.
Well, kids are very often, their parents did one thing, so they want to do the opposite, whatever it is. What was your rebel fist up in the air? I mean,
I definitely had my time.
What was your hero's journey where you had to leave your village? I mean, tell me about that.
Well, it was that whole Switzerland thing that I was telling you about. So in my, I had done all the practices in through my teenage years, and right around 17, 18, I was like, okay, I'm going to do my own thing. You guys do your yoga stuff. I know the real way. I'm going to bring peace to the world. Only to find out that they were right all along, but I had to figure it out.
They were right.
I know. So but I think everybody has to go through that. I think every kid has to go through that. And it's just a part of our development to, it's like when you have your terrible twos, you have to reject it and feel like you have the power to push it away in order to feel that you can powerfully re-embrace it as your own. And I think especially maybe for me, because my father was a guru, it was like, I'm not going to be you. I have to be me. And so by rejecting what he was doing, I could find myself. But it is kind of the ultimate irony that now I pretty much do the same thing.
Parents were right the whole time.
I know.
So you went to Switzerland.
Yeah.
But now you also have a PhD.
Yes.
In psychology.
Yes.
So how did that come into the mix?
So after I decided, okay, my job is to bring inner peace. True outer peace begins with inner peace, and this is the way I'm going to do it. I really saw the connection between Western psychology and Eastern teachings. And the more that I studied psychology, I felt like each could kind of round out the other. There are words in psychology that really speak to what has already been taught in yoga and vice versa. And so I went to study psychology really to round out what I had learned in yoga. And I find that there is a great synergy between these two, the East and the West. And it allows a level of understanding, especially for a Western mind. You know, it helps to have like the science and this relates to this word in psychology or this theory. And for many of us these days, we like to know, okay, the mind is the first door. If the mind accepts, okay, this makes sense, this is logical, this is scientific, then I'm willing to go a little bit further.
Yeah.
So the psychology really helped with that.
Yeah.
So in other words, you kind of have to get through to the ego first.
Yes.
And then you can kind of slowly bring them into finding out who they really are.
You got it. You got to get the ego on your side. And it's got to be like, it has to be brought along enough to go, okay, maybe there's something to this.
Good.
Now, one of the things we really learned and focused on in our yoga teacher training was the Samskaras, the ruts that we get stuck into, these limiting belief patterns. And I realized, man, am I full of Samskaras?
Yeah.
Man, am I full of limiting beliefs? Because, part of the impetus of exploring the human journey is I was given a narrative about life that was a certain way, the divine being a cosmic judge and reward and punishment, heaven and hell. And as I've become more awake and more aware of consciousness, I'm realizing that was some belief pattern that has kept me from having other experiences. And you give presence to the Upanishads and you say, what is the single truth that if known would solve everything? And this is the question that the yogis thousands of years ago, they were saying that's ultimately what we're trying to get to, is that truth. And I'm like, well, who am I? Where am I from? What am I doing? What's this whole thing about? I'm like, oh, they were asking these questions 5,000 years ago.
Yeah.
Give presence to your work in solving that inner question of, if there was one single truth that we all knew, it would solve everything.
Yeah. Well, I think the thing that blows me away is that the yogis of several thousand years ago still have the same problems, apparently, that we do, because they were trying to answer the same questions. Yeah. So I guess all this relationship stuff and all of that, it's nothing new. Yeah. It's been around for as long as human beings have been around. And I do love this question, what is the single truth that, if known, would solve everything? And according to yoga, and this just feels intuitively right for me, this is why I teach it, is that we are that abiding space that is there before waking, dreaming, deep sleep, that space that is already whole, that's already complete, that's eternal, that's abiding, and that doesn't need anything to be added and nothing can be taken away from it. But through that space, kind of like clouds moving through the sky, move thoughts and experiences and all kinds of things. And because this sky of awareness, it kind of has no quality of its own. It's kind of like silence behind the sound. It's so easy to not notice it and to forget it. And so what happens is it appears that we become the contents in the sky, the thoughts, the feelings, the emotions, the experiences, and we lose sight of the source that we are. Yeah. And this is what the yogis say is the source of our suffering. That we have forgotten who we are, and we therefore assume the limitations of whatever happens to be in the sky at any given moment. Yeah. And that if we could re-experience our source nature, not just at the level of our mind, but know it in every fiber of our being, we would be immediately, simultaneously free of all suffering, because we would be free of believing that we are the contents of the sky. Yeah. So that's that single truth
Yeah.
that if known would solve
Oh,
everything.
I love that. And you give, in your book, you give presence to the sky, and then you even give another analogy. You go, well, here's another way to look at it. Let's say you're a pot on a stove, and you put potatoes in it, and then you take those out and you put carrots in it, and then maybe you put spaghetti in it, and you're like, oh, I'm potatoes, I'm carrots, I'm spaghetti, and there's all these things. You're like, no. You're not the contents, you're the container.
Yeah.
And the container is that conscious awareness of what's in there. Oh my God, I've been identifying with the contents all my life.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to solve problems from solving the contents rather than being the container.
That's exactly it. Yeah.
All right, well, show's over. Thanks a lot, everybody,
Okay,
for watching.
go home.
I solved the problem. It's amazing.
Yeah. But then the question is, well, how do I do that?
Yeah.
Right.
That's what I was just going to ask.
Yeah. Because
Right?
from here, I mean, it's nice cocktail party talk. It's really interesting. It's fun to think about.
Yeah.
And there are people who are, I don't mean this in a disrespectful way, but like armchair yogis who can talk. You can talk about it all day.
Yeah.
But the question is, that is only going to take you so far. We have to actually experience our containerness. Until then, it's nice thinking. But this is, again, we're not trying to solve it from the mind, but from beyond the mind, right? Where we are experientially knowing it. You can only talk yourself into so many things, right? You can't just say like, I'm source. These are not the contents. These are not me. It's not going to work.
It does not work.
Yeah.
So we're playing the character or the role in a play, in a cosmic thing, and we came here to have these experiences. What is the thing that we kind of need to let go or to hold on? 'Cause, I mean, I have the attachment to, I desire the pleasures of life, and I'm averse to the things that I don't like. I'm the fears or whatever the things are. And I realize that creates the suffering of, the desire for this and I don't want that and I do want that. How do we get to that space where we recognize, okay, I get it. I'm part of Source having a human experience. What are some things that we can do just to go calm down?
Yeah.
The illusion. How can we identify the illusion?
Yeah. The more that you recognize that you're already whole, the less we're going to buy into the illusion that we need something. So if I recognize I'm already everything, you're already the abiding eternal space, you are the soul, that nothing can be added to you, nothing can be taken away from you. Why would I be afraid of anything leaving me?
Yeah.
Right? I already know I'm already it. There's nothing that could leave us that could make us less. And there's nothing that could be added to us. No amount of recognition or appreciation or money. They're nice things. Enjoy them for what they are. But don't think that they're somehow going to make us more whole because we already are.
So the key is the more whole.
Yeah, that's it. That's the key, right? Once you know it, then you can be in life and enjoy all of life and all its notes and everything that it has to bring you. I mean, there's nothing that says you can't enjoy the appreciation or the recognition or the abundance or whatever.
Or enjoying even some of the hard things that happen.
Absolutely.
It's because it's really part of life.
It is.
Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. Once you know your wholeness, you have no fear of any of the entire notes of life that life will bring, right? Because even when sadness comes, you're okay. And when happiness comes, you're okay. You don't have to fight anything. You don't have to be afraid of anything. You can be open to all of life.
And you give presence to the more you do the Nidra practice, the more you do the meditation, the easier it is to recognize the illusion for the thing that is going, oh, I'm just here to have the experience.
That's exactly it. Yeah. So the more, Yoga Nidra is really, when we enter that Turiya state, you are resting as your wholeness, the fullness of your nature. And just by reestablishing yourself as, oh my God, this is who I am, less and less, you don't care. You're not so worried. Look at how much time we are occupied by what people think of us. Right? Why are we occupied with that? Because we think that what they think is somehow going to reflect on who we are. And if they think well of us, that we're somehow okay. That if they think badly of us, we think we're not okay. How much time we worry about what they think. Right? Yeah. But that's all sourced from this illusion of not being whole. And the more that we enter and experientially know that wholeness that we are, the less it matters to us. Well, it'd be nice if they thought that way, but we already know we're okay no matter what. Right? And again, no amount of talking ourselves into that, oh, I don't care. I don't care what they think. We can tell ourselves that, but that may not land at the deepest core of our being. In Yoga Nidra, you're shifting it from the deepest core of your being.
I feel like people come in, they kind of they get a core wound.
Yeah.
Our friend Dr. Lori Ebert, this is her book that she lent to me. Shout out to Dr. Lori. And she does work with people in their core wound, and you know, she does a lot of things, but one of the things she's worked with us is identifying that core wound. I feel like we come in as part of infinite source, but then we're like, okay, something's got to be tweaked a little bit so I can have my human journey.
Yeah.
Can you give presence to that? Kind of what's the purpose you think of that whole thing?
Yeah, so a couple of things that are coming to mind. The first is people will say to me like, well, you know, why do we have to go through this whole thing of forgetting who we are and getting identified with who we're not? And we go through all this human thing and we become afraid of certain things and pulled towards certain things. Why? And the answers the yogis give is actually, I think, quite beautiful. So if you imagine source like an ocean, and that we are each like little waves on that ocean, different manifestations of that same source.
I love it.
But if source is everything, the only way for it to know itself is for us who are a piece of that ocean to forget our true nature, to travel away from the source, only to rediscover our source nature again. That is the only way that the source can re-experience its own nature over and over and over again.
Yeah.
So this is, according to yoga, the purpose of our human journey is that we're supposed to forget and we're supposed to move away, and all that stuff is supposed to happen so that we can rediscover, oh my God, I was whole all the time.
So good.
I've always been what I've been seeking.
Yeah.
Right?
So those of us that are, I'm broken, I'm not good enough, I'm not loved, all that, I'm not enough. The whole point is for you to have that experience.
Exactly.
And then to rediscover, not only are you enough, you're whole, you're part of the divine.
You are God. Yeah, you are a piece of God.
You are a piece of the godness of all of us.
And that core wound is a part of that separation. You know, I think Eckhart Tolle says it also. He says that the pain body is first developed when we experience separation from the whole, right? And that the core, you know, we often put it on, and I'm not discounting that, you know, we put it on our parents or a situation that happened, and all these things happen. But the original separation, I believe, was the separation from the whole.
Yeah.
Right? That I forgot that I was whole. I forgot that no matter what, Source is receiving us exactly as we are unconditionally. And we came to believe an experience or a remark or a thought or an experience, I'm not whole, I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy, I'm not love, I'm a mistake, whatever it is. And that becomes the core wound or samskara from which we live our lives.
So good.
So you talked about intention, how important intention was. And so talk about that a little bit, because I think that so often people don't live in a life of intention.
Yeah.
And so how important it is even going into that Nidra state to be able to identify that so that it actually works. Like
Absolutely.
It's really working.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, you know, this is one of the things that's really unique about Yoga Nidra, because other styles of meditation will take you to these subtle states. But what's different about Yoga Nidra is you're going to these subtle states and then shifting things from these subtle states. And that is how we use intention. So you're going to these other dimensions, other realms of consciousness, where what's dense and difficult to change in the waking state is actually very malleable and easy to change in these subtle states of being. So it's kind of like changing water at the water level as opposed to changing a block of ice, which is like in the waking state. So Yoga Nidra and intentions in Yoga Nidra, we use them in two ways. The first is we plant them in Yoga Nidra and then we reinforce them in life. But let's talk about the Yoga Nidra part in intentions. Okay. Because that's where it's really unique. So most of us, let's say in the waking state, we have an intention, I love myself, right? That is a change that we are trying to affect from the mental body, the mind level. But if we haven't shifted it from our core consciousness, the core consciousness, what is incomplete in the core consciousness will outdo what's at the mind level. So you can say to yourself until the cows come home, I love myself, I love myself, I love myself in the waking state. But if you haven't shifted up here, it's going to be like, no, you don't. Yes, I do. No, you don't. Right? And this is going to outdo it. So what we are doing in Yoga Nidra is we are working actually all the way in. Yoga Nidra is one of the very few techniques that actually has the ability to reach into our core consciousness and shift our samskaras, our karmic patterns, at the root from where they exist. Not at the effect, which is at the level of the mind, but at the cause level. So this is what we're doing with intentions. We're placing them at the part of the Yoga Nidra where we have really touched into that core consciousness and are able to shift it there. Then once you shift it there, you can reinforce it in life.
Okay.
Right? So when you see yourself going down that old pattern, beating ourselves up or whatever it is, we can bring in that intention, which has now been planted at the core consciousness, and say, nope, I'm at peace with myself as I am.
Yeah.
Right. And now that becomes, the more you feed it in the waking state, you've planted it up here, you feed it while you're awake. That's the water that nurtures the seed. It starts to take root.
Okay.
Yeah, you just slip right into teacher mode right there, don't you? You're passionate. You're really good at this. I mean, I've seen you teach your class, and I mean, this is just so natural for you, and you have such a passion for that.
I do.
Yeah.
I do. I mean, and it's the same with you. I think that everyone's core nature is to feel like we have made a contribution to humanity.
Yeah.
I don't think there's anything more fulfilling or satisfying than that.
Right.
And we all have our different ways of doing it. This happens to be mine, but
and you're doing that out of your bliss, not out of your, well, if I do this, then I'll be whole.
Exactly.
Instead of I am whole, and this is my bliss.
Yeah. And that brings us back. It's not that we can't do, but is that doing coming from an experience of our own wholeness, like your expression in the world? Or is it coming from, well, if I do this, then they'll love me?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Completely different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, the Nidra is like kind of like hypnotherapy, but not really, right? So what's kind of the difference? Because you're kind of still going into those different states of consciousness like you are with hypnotherapy, right?
Yes. Yeah, there are definitely similarities and there are definitely differences. And I've been thinking about this, and I'm like, I wonder if Yoga Nidra was yogic hypnosis. I wonder if, because
guided imagery.
Well, I mean, just like psychology is kind of a reflection of the yogic teachings, I wonder if hypnosis is a reflection of Yoga Nidra. I don't know.
Yeah.
But there are differences and similarities. Both of them definitely go to the subtler states of being to initiate shifts. One of the differences is in hypnosis, we're really looking at shifting the body-mind itself, and it's very effective at doing that. Yoga Nidra has a slightly different intention. So we want to make shifts within the body-mind, but in order to recognize that abiding space behind it, right? So in hypnosis, it's more about mastering things in life, smoking less, eating less, all those things. Yoga Nidra, you can do the same, but ultimately it's to recognize your sky-like nature. So it just has a slightly different intent. And then just from a biological perspective, the big difference is that, interestingly, in hypnosis, the left side of the brain becomes quiet, and it's the right part of the brain that becomes activated. So the shifts happen in hypnosis through the activation of the right half of the brain, the right hemisphere, but still quieting down the mind so you can get access, right? So in both of them, you got to get that mind out of the way. In Yoga Nidra, when you quiet down the mind, it's actually the whole brain that gets activated. So there's a balance. There's almost, when you look at PET scans of people in Yoga Nidra, what you'll see is a virtually symmetrical movement through both halves of the brain while people are doing Yoga Nidra.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
So it's a whole brain shift.
Okay.
So you're like
Very
balancing
interesting.
it out.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
So part of my journey is to come out of the belief system. This is the only truth. This is the way it is. And I like the idea of, instead of being a Buddhist, I can be Buddha-like.
Yeah.
Instead of being,
Beautiful.
I am a Christian,
Yeah.
I can be Christ-like.
Beautiful.
And that gives me the space of going, oh, I kind of see what the religions were trying to do.
Exactly.
They were trying to get you connected back to your whole.
That's it.
But then they got caught into, yeah, but if you do it this way,
Yeah.
then you'll really be, and then but you got to do our way. And so maybe there's this human control, kind of this ego side of it, instead of being connected this way. And I now, after reading your material, I see how you can take the ego construct and you can put it into, it has to be this way, or you can let that go and put it into the spiritual context of you are whole. And maybe that's what the religions were trying to show us, is a divine connection within, rather than you're separate and you have to be made whole by some exterior outward thing.
Yeah.
You're teaching us, no, it's on the inside. That's where the work and the connection is.
Absolutely. And I'm with you. I mean, I read it now that I have steeped myself in these yogic teachings, and I read other scriptures and other traditions. I'm like, oh my God, they're all pointing to the same truth, right? Yeah. Be still and know that I am God. Yeah. What are we doing in Yoga Nidra? Exactly that. Exactly. You know, the peace that passeth understanding. What's understanding? The mind. Yeah. This is an experience of your true nature that bypasses your mind. You know, they in Catholicism they talk about the immortal soul. What are they talking about? Your source. Yeah. You know, so that everybody's been pointing to the same thing. It's different words. But it's the same truth.
I believed in that immortality of the soul, but I figured your soul started the day you were born. I didn't know anything about before you were born, you were somewhere else. Then I learned about pre-birth planning. I learned that you're a soul. I learned about karma. And I was like, oh, so my first idea was like, oh, karma's going to get you. Because karma's a bitch. It's going to get you. You give presence to that. You go, no. It's not it's going to get you. It's simply a balancing. Yeah. So give presence to karma. And so the fear construct and how it works.
Yeah. So, I mean, really, karma is just a natural law. It's like gravity, right? So, I mean, gravity, if you work with gravity, you step off a stair, you're good. You step off a building, you're not so good, right? But it's not because gravity's out to punish you. It's just because we didn't act in accordance with its laws.
Nobody says gravity's a bitch.
Yeah, exactly.
Everybody's accepted it.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And in the same way, we just know that if we're seeing an effect, there was a cause. It's just really that simple.
Cause and effect.
Yeah.
You reap and you sow. That's a Bible type of thing.
As you sow, so shall you reap. It's the same teachings again. But I think what we tend to do is, like, when we see the effect and we think it's negative, and our mind makes it negative, like, oh my God, I was so bad, this is punishment. But what I add to this is that regardless of what comes from the outside, whatever effects are happening as a result of the billiard balls of the world, we still have the final say on how we choose to be with that effect. So, for example, you know, things come together in such a way that, you know, you have an illness or something like that, or you get laid off from your job. And you know, some people who have an illness use it to turn their lives around, who say, you know, in some weird way, this is the best blessing that ever happened to me. Yeah. They have just made that good karma because of how they chose to be with it. So yes, there is a law of cause and effect, but you can change that. You can change the effect that you create by what you bring to it, right? So you are also the cause, and you also create the effect that you want by how you choose to be with life events.
That's a hard one for people to grasp, though, because nobody wants to take responsibility that they might be the cause of their suffering.
I know. Yeah.
And it's just easier to blame other people.
Yeah, I know. It's an easier way out. And here's the thing. I'm not saying that other people, you know, we're all to blame, but we always have two choices, and there's always two parts of an effect, of a karmic effect. There's how they are, and then how we choose to be with how they are, right? Yeah. We can wait for them to change, and good luck with that, right? Or we can shift what we have control over, which is how we are with them.
Yeah. I won't be happy until she changes.
Exactly. Yeah. You're a jerk. And so when I get angry with you, I'm choosing to be angry and I'm getting the effect of that. I'm not taking away that they might be a jerk, right?
Right.
But I'm the one who's choosing to react the way that I do and therefore creating my own outcome. So even though it feels like a lot of responsibility, it's also empowering because we actually get to shift for ourselves. And that person may never change, but we get to walk away feeling calm, open-hearted, more peaceful, regardless of if they shifted or not.
And that's where the real change is at.
Huge.
Now, you also have another program that you do, the yoga psychology. So tell us about that.
Yoga body psychology.
Yes, the body psychology program.
Okay.
Yoga body psychology program, also offered at Sweha. This is a yoga therapy program, and it's really based on the idea that incomplete experiences that didn't quite make it through our body-mind complex tend to move kind of like from water towards ice and begin to settle and condensify in the body. And it can densify and become an energetic block. It can keep the body from healing a physical injury. So people will say to me, well, is it all in my head? Like I have a real injury. But you'll notice like when we have injuries, often there's fear that's centered around it. Even as we start to come back and we start to move it again and we're like, oh my God, is that okay? So whatever's incomplete in our body mind tends to settle in weak areas of our body. And so what we do in yoga body psychology or yoga therapy is we really put the body in positions where we can surface and become aware of those areas of blocked energy and support the healing energy of the body to really move and flow again to support the healing of that part of the body.
So is it more of a one-on-one type of thing where you're like somebody who understands where the blocks are at and can recognize them is working with one person, or is it
it's both.
You can do it as a class also.
Yeah, you can also do it as a class. It's a little less targeted, but most people have stuff like in their hamstrings, in their low back, in their heart, in their neck, in their shoulders. So you can do it in a class and everyone gets benefit, or you can do the one-on-one targeted approach.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, you give presence to the Ayurveda, the science of the body, where you say, if you don't learn how to move that energy, it gets trapped in there.
Yes.
And then we have dis-ease in our body.
Yeah.
Because we can't get that to move. Is that the same thing?
That's exactly it. That's exactly the same idea. So, we've been talking about source, but, the energy of the source that animates us is source energy made visible. The spirit in us is actually that which is digesting our food and healing us, et cetera, et cetera. But when we have these traumatic experiences, that energy, that spirit energy, that's actually feeding all the organs, the nerves, the systems of the body, can't do its work fully, right? So it compromises the way the spirit moves in our body. And it sets up the state of dis-ease, right? Because the spirit force cannot fully feed the body. And so exactly as you said in Ayurveda, this is what they believe is the source of illness, is the disconnection from the whole, right? But it's not just one disconnection. It's, for most of us, it's like little bits of places where we're like, I'm not quite sure I'm safe. I don't think I can keep my heart open here. And we develop all these areas where we've kind of shut the door on being completely open vessels of divine force.
Wow, that's good. That whole disconnection, you give presence to the Adam and Eve story, which is, if you're someone who was raised in that tradition, you're like, well, here's how it started. Adam and Eve in the garden, the devil, the snake, we're given the characters, and they ate from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and then God had to kick them out. And you talk about how that's an allegory of separation from source. And so rather than taking the literalism of it, you're able to take the mythology or the story of it to put into language. This is how we're using this as a metaphor for disconnection. Give presence to that story, and kind of for people that are still in that tradition, some ways for them to reframe that.
So one way to look at it, looking at it from another point of view, but it's the same teachings. Every tradition is pointing to the same thing. But in the beginning, Adam and Eve, two waves on that ocean of source, were connected to God. They were connected to the source. They didn't feel separate from each other because they knew that even though there were two waves, they were a part of the same ocean. And so they were in paradise. They were at one with God. And everything was given to them. All abundance was given to them because they were a part of the whole. And maybe the mind, devil means to divide. It comes from the word division. And maybe in this story, God says, do not eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Do not believe the mind that tells you that your wholeness is not here and that you will find wholeness by pushing things away and getting things to attachment and fear.
So good.
And when they did, when they believed that mind, they bought into the illusion, lost the connection from the whole. And if you know in the allegory, then they were doomed to toil and struggle the earth, right? And if you look at how much we're worried about feeling whole and people loving us and recognition and success, all this stuff to try to regain that wholeness that was a part of our essential nature, it is a fall, right? The beauty is, and here's an interesting thing, it's actually, sin, the word sin means to miss the mark. And original sin was the original place where we forgot our source nature. And there's a beautiful line in the Yoga Sutras that says something like, all this suffering can be resolved by coming back to the primal cause, which was forgetfulness of our true nature. So what are we doing in Yoga Nidra? We are remembering our source nature. We're reconnecting with the Garden of Eden, remembering this is where the wholeness is. Once you know that, all that suffering is taken away.
Nice. Oh, I like that.
This
That's
is
a good reframe.
This is a free show. Slow down. This is a free show. People should be paying for this. This is amazing. And thank you for sharing that. Your work is a worldwide body of work, and you spend a lot of time traveling. You spend a lot of time training. Give presence to your work. You threw out Iceland as a place where you've been living. Give some presence to kind of who you are and what you're doing in the world and helping raise consciousness.
So since the time I told you in my 20s, for the last 30 years, I'm 50, I'm going to be 51. For the last 30 years, I've just really devoted my life to this work because to me, there's nothing else that matters. There's nothing else I want to do. Nothing else that lights me up more than this, as you can see. And so I've been gifted with the ability to be able to have people bring me all over the world. And my Yoga Nidras are used in correctional facilities, mental health facilities. I've been lucky enough to work with military, not in the US, but in other countries, helping them gain the skills to develop resilience in the brain and to work with PTSD. The tax service of other countries, like the IRS version, to help them with their stress, because they have they take a lot of negativity. So advertising firms, Marsh Candy Company, all different kinds of places where I've been lucky enough to kind of teach. And one of those was Iceland. And I was teaching a program there, and one of the students, we had a nice connection, and but over time, though, we stayed in touch after he was no longer my student. And now 3 years ago, we married.
Oh, cool.
And so he's Icelandic. That's how I ended up in Iceland. And so I spend part of my time there and then travel around the world. And he travels with me sometimes when he can. But he has 5 children. And so we have 5 stepchildren together. And so it's been wonderful because I really spent my whole life kind of, being footloose and fancy free, traveling the world. And now I get to have the family experience too, which is wonderful.
Oh, wow.
And to be able to bring Nidra to the kids and bring all these teachings to the kids in simple ways. I love that.
So you get to learn a lot about the ego body through these wonderful kids that you've got in your life.
Yes, they teach you much.
Oh yeah,
I must
they
say.
do. They are gurus in their own right.
Yeah, thank you, teacher. Now go to bed.
Exactly. Yeah.
And your Sweeha connection, because Casey Miller, the founder, the CEO of Sweeha, amazing individual. She has so much love and light that she just brings through her. How was that connection made was it through your father, or was it through you?
No, well, I think she knew of my father and knew of Kripalu, which was the center that he had started. And I actually lived here in Phoenix for 5 years.
Oh.
And while I was here and I was traveling a lot, I thought, it would be so great to just have to not always have to travel. And so I reached out to her and just sent her an email and just said, this is who I am, and would you be interested? And she was on it. And she is very intuitive. This woman is on. And she just said, I think that this is a perfect fit. I think you need to be here. And she's like, I just know that this is going to take off at Sweeha. And she was dead on. She had it.
Yeah, your classes are packed.
They are. Yeah,
they are.
And if you can't get it right now, you got to wait the next 6 months.
Exactly. Exactly.
Oh, that's good. So you've integrated your program, your teachings in the actual school program, the school classwork. Then.
The curriculum at Sweeha, exactly. Yeah. And then we have a center in Florida, the Amrit Yoga Institute, where we also do trainings. So we kind of got an east-west place, but I love to partner with Sweeha, and they're just a great place. I love the work that they do. Yeah.
Give presence to your website, how people can get a hold of you, and some of the work that you're offering people through online resources or workshops or whatever.
Yeah. So you can go to KaminiDesai.com, just my first and last name.com, and all my programs are on there. You can also go to amrityoga.org, AMRITYOGA.org, and both of those will list programs that I lead, but also teachers that I have trained who lead in Florida, but also around the world. And also you can find all kinds of resources on YouTube. I've got a relationships course online on my website. But there's lots of free stuff out there that I've got as well. I also have a Yoga Nidra app. So
tell me more.
Yes, go on Google Play or Android, just the Android store, and type in Kamini Desai, and what will come up is I am Yoga Nidra.
Oh.
Only Android, not Apple?
It's both.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. No, it's both.
iPhone users, sorry.
Almost panicked there.
No, we got you covered.
Yeah.
Okay.
You download, I think it's $3.99. You get 3 Yoga Nidras for free included, and then slowly we'll start adding more, and you can purchase those in addition if you like. But it's great, and what I like about it is I've set it up so that even if you don't have an internet connection, you can still do the Nidras.
Oh, wow.
Nice.
So anytime, anywhere, any place, just put on a Nidra.
And what's the length of time for those?
I've got 3 different ones, and I have the one that I use actually a lot is the rapid recharge. It's 20 minutes, and you're good to go. So it's 20 minutes all the way up to, I think, 32 or 33 minutes. Now
give presence to that rapid recharge, because I've heard you talk about that.
Yeah. So it actually takes about 20 minutes to get all the way down through all the brain waves and all the way back up. And generally, when you sleep at night, it takes about 3 hours to go through that same cycle. And this is why yogis say that 45 minutes of Yoga Nidra is the equivalent of 3 hours of sleep.
Wow.
But it takes at least a minimum. You need to do at least 20 minutes to get the full, to go all the way down and come all the way up. You can do shorter Nidras, but you won't get the full experience. Yeah.
You said 20 minutes. We've got 20, 30, 45. Now, is there a benefit to going even longer, past an hour, or how does that work?
Yeah. So it's really what organically and naturally happens for your system. For most people, just discomfort will kick them out. Your body will just say, okay, you're done. You've had enough. Out of here.
Yeah.
But for some people, they naturally go into Nidras for longer. And if that happens naturally, keep on going, right?
Okay.
So there's deep regeneration that needs to happen. And if your body's saying we need to stay here, then go with it.
So it sounds like you really need to tune into your body.
Absolutely.
So if you're not finding the effect of it after 20 or 30 minutes, it may be that your body is just saying, hey, hang on for a little bit longer.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I'll have people who finish the Nidra that I'm guiding, and they just, it just turns off, and they just stay in the Nidra state, for as long as they need to. The other thing that will often happen is they fall asleep. right?
Yeah.
But this is because the body's exhausted. And, what I always say is restoration before liberation, right? So it's because your body is sleep deprived, it's exhausted, it needs that regeneration before you can do more. So let it happen.
You even get presence of that. We're going to do sleep. And we think while we're asleep so much where we wake up exhausted because we spend our whole time doing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Amazing.
Yeah.
There are different Nidra styles. Some have a lot of affirmations. Some are really direct. Give your your space on how you like to set up the Nidra. Do you need a lot of I am this, I am that, a lot of fluff? How do you feel that works for you?
And do you mind if I add on to that question? Also, you mentioned how it gets in there and it works on those samskaras. So maybe even giving a little bit more presence to how that works.
Okay. So Yoga Nidra, different from a typical guided meditation, is actually very structured. And it's structured to work through what we understand in yoga as the koshas, but think of it as the aura. So subtler levels of your being. And it basically works backwards through embodiment. So we came into embodiment a certain way, and in Yoga Nidra, we're working backwards all the way to what's called the bliss body, the subtlest level of separation between you and the source. And this is where our core consciousness is held. This is where our samskaras, our incomplete experiences are held here. And so basically a Yoga Nidra is structured to work backwards through these bodies, these koshas, sheaths, the aura, whatever you want to call it, out to this bliss body, and actually even beyond it. So it works with the samskaras or this core consciousness in a couple different ways. The first is the ultimate, which is realization. When you realize that everything that's in that hard drive or that core consciousness was just stuff that was acquired, and you are the abiding space of awareness, you're automatically free of everything in that hard drive, right?
Awesome.
So that's the ultimate. However, that may not happen tomorrow. And so the next way that Yoga Nidra works with that core consciousness is it allows you to create a meditative relationship with those samskaras so that you're more and more able to see, oh, there's that thing again. Rather than being it and putting it on and believing, I'm not good enough or, things never work out for me, you can go, oh, there's that belief. And you can kind of see it as a distance outside of you. So that you get some power and mastery over the patterns that used to rule you. And then the third way that we work with the core consciousness is through the use of intention. And essentially what we do is we go to the deepest state of Yoga Nidra. You're abiding as the source, the ocean that you are. And essentially the slate is wiped clean. You are disidentified from all samskaras, right? You've let go of all of them. And then when we come right back into the bliss body where these samskaras are held, we plant an intention. But that intention is now planted on a blank slate. Right? It's not planted on top of, I love myself. Well, no, you don't, right? Or the other way around. No. We plant it on that clear slate. And because it's planted at the seed level, at the subtlest and most powerful layer of our being, that begins to affect the way that we perceive, the way we think, the way we feel, and the way that we act. It changes from the core of our being. And that's how these intentions work through this structure of Yoga Nidra. You don't have to have an intention. You don't have to even use it because just going to the source and the wholeness that you are is going to do the work. And everything that you don't need is going to fall away from you. Even the things that you don't know, because there are beliefs and patterns that are affecting us that we don't even know that are affecting us. So yes, you can have an intention, but you don't have to have an intention.
Okay. Yeah. So when you were talking about your yoga body psychology, now what is the difference between that program and somebody who's just doing yoga?
Well, the intent actually of both of them is exactly the same. So what I just mentioned about things being incomplete and then being lodged in the body, the intent in a regular yoga class is to encounter these blocks and to move through them consciously. However, if we don't have somebody coaching us and who's right there with us, the tendency is to move right around the block and avoid it, right? And so in yoga body psychology, also known as yoga therapy, really what we're doing is because it's really one-on-one and because we're teaching the people the skills of specifically how to recognize the block, where to find it, how to be with it once you're there. It's very much oriented around that one particular thing and giving people the skills to encounter versus avoid. But once you've learned it, you can do it in a yoga class too.
Okay.
Absolutely. The other difference, David and I were talking about this too, is that I, as the yoga therapist or yoga body psychology professional, would actually support the person in the poses. So if I'm doing the yoga poses myself and I'm trying to find the blocks and I'm trying to breathe through them, it can be just a lot to focus on. Whereas if I'm held in the pose, I can really just focus on breathing and relaxing and opening that area. It just makes it a little bit easier. Yeah.
Almost like a fast track.
Exactly. That's
like
exactly
that.
it. Yes.
I like that.
Yes.
So our friend Dr. Lori Ebert loves Yoga Nidra. And she told me the most important thing that people can do is Yoga Nidra because it helps transform. What are things that we can do to help bring yoga to the world? What's it going to take to raise consciousness, to let everyone know there's these ancient practices that are for a modern individual?
Yeah. I think the answer is in the thing that we fear the most, which is suffering. And, we all often give suffering, and, myself included, I don't love suffering either, but we give it a bad rap. But yet it can be the doorway into the next thing, the next level, because for most of us as human beings, it's only when we have suffered enough, when we beat our head against the wall enough that we say, I'm done. There has to be another way. I am finished with this old way. It isn't working. And only then are we willing very often to look for something else, right?
Yeah, absolutely. There were several people in our yoga teacher training class that they were there because they had an injury that they overcame, and it was through yoga.
Yeah.
And that they want to spread it.
Exactly. Yeah. And then once you've broken through yourself and you found, oh my God, this works. This is the answer. This is the thing that I've been seeking all along. I just didn't know where to find it. Then you want to share it with other people.
Yeah.
Right? And the add-on to that is also, it's one person at a time. I'm not, it would be great if all of a sudden the consciousness of the world just lifted, but I think it's actually each person being touched in their own way, having their own realization, sharing with other people, that the entire forest changes one tree at a time.
Just like your dad bringing it over to America, right?
Yeah.
It's so good. We like to end an episode with the guest kind of giving presents to, if there's one thing that you took away from today, there's one thing that I want to make sure that you get to know, it's this thing. Give presents to what is that one thing that drives you.
Just remember that you already are what you are seeking. There's nothing that can be added to you to make you more. There's nothing that can be taken away from you to make you less. And when you truly know this, then you will really begin to live your soul's purpose.
Beautiful. Dr. Kamini Desai, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank
That was
you.
awesome.
It was so great to be with you both. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us here on Exploring the Human Journey. You can find us as a video on YouTube or listen to us as a podcast. You can also join in the conversation by following us on Facebook and Instagram. For more information, go to the website at exploringthehumanjourney.com.